Well, welcome back. Break over. Now, before the break, we were talking about the utilitarian philosophy. So, good afternoon. So, we were talking about the criticism of utilitarianism. First important one that we have briefly mentioned, that was the idea of individual rights versus common good. So, individual rights versus common good. So, we are talking about that. We had seen that people like Bentham will say that common good is more important, society is more important, and critics of Bentham will say that individuals are more important. So, this, as I told you, is one of the oldest criticism, oldest we can say controversy or debate in the history of ethics. And today also this debate is very fiercely fought in the moral philosophy, that what is more important, individual or society. What should be given higher priority? Should individuals suffer for the sake of society, or should society suffer for the sake of individual? So, this is something that we have to think of, that we have to talk about. Now, in order to understand this controversy, let us take some example. Think about these examples, these cases, and tell me what do you think is right and wrong in these cases according to you. First important case that I will talk about, it is a more theoretical case, as I told you. First will be more theoretical textbook type of case, and second we will talk about will be more practical, practical life case in a way. So first case that I will talk about is the case of ancient Roman Colosseums. Ancient Roman Colosseum. So you must have heard the name of Colosseum. What are these Colosseums? Well, these Colosseums were in ancient Rome. These Colosseums were large circular amphitheaters. Large circular amphitheaters, a type of sports arena, stadium type of thing in which blood sports used to happen. So in these Colosseums you can see gladiators used to fight, and this fight used to take place till the time one person is killed. So a lot of bloodshed used to be there, lots of, you can say, cruelty was there, and finally the loser was killed and the winner took everything. That was a type of blood sports there. Now in those Colosseums, well, they are huge structures, so big they were, some of them are even today, so they are often also known as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So these Colosseums were very powerful, very big, structures. Now, among many things that were done in Colosseum, one very commonly done thing in Colosseum was that we can see that sometimes somewhere a Christian was brought, and this Christian was thrown into that Colosseum along with the hungry lion. Christian, remember, Christianity was a new religion at that time, and Rome had not yet turned into Christianity. So in large, huge, vast Roman Empire, in some corner of the empire, some remote corners of the empire, some small group of Christians used to live in a very small community. So, and these Christians were sometimes prosecuted for the sake of their religious beliefs. So, the religious persecution has been very common in the history of humanity, as all of you know. So, these Christians were thrown into that Colosseum sometimes, and well, with the hungry lion, and they used to fight with each other. And in that fight, of course, the lion will kill the Christian in a very brutal manner, and this whole act of one helpless Christian being killed by a hungry and ferocious lion, it was enjoyed by a large number of people. It was a great entertainment activity. So hundreds of thousands of people used to come whenever it was planned. It was a great entertainment activity. Whenever it was planned, then it was announced in the whole area that on that day at that time a Christian is going to be killed by a hungry lion. Please come and enjoy the scene. So it was a great spectacle, and thousands of people used to come and used to enjoy that killing of a person. Now the question here is that do you think that this killing of one Christian by this hungry lion, can that be morally justified? Now, when I ask you this question, then perhaps all of you will jump to the conclusion, no sir, it is wrong, it shouldn't have been done. So, perhaps most of you will say so. If you say so, then Bentham will say, hold on. You cannot make decision like this. Moral decision cannot be like that. How can you decide? Nothing is right, remember, and nothing is wrong. Then how can you decide? Well, make a calculation. How can you make a calculation? Just imagine first of all that say how much pain is created. This Christian is dead. Suppose for example, total pain created for that Christian is say 100,000 units of pain. Remember, this Christian is killed is not a problem. Death is not a problem. Death is not a bad in itself. Death is bad only because it creates lots of pain. And life is not good in itself. Life is good only because life creates lots of pleasure. So remember, pleasure is the only good and pain is the only bad. So Christian dies is not a problem, but while death, well, so much of pain is created from, so much of torture is there, so much of cruelty is there, so much of pain is there. Suppose for example, that just for the sake of theoretical calculation, let us assume the total pain created for him is 100,000 units. Let us calculate total pleasure also. Suppose each Christian in this case gets say, sorry, each person who watches that event, well, they get 10 units of pleasure each. And suppose for example, there are 20,000 people are there. Of course, 10 units of pleasure each, much less than the pain of a Christian. 100,000 and only 10 units, small pleasure, small entertainment. But suppose there are 20,000 people are there in that auditorium, in that coliseum. So total turns out to be 200,000. One of my students asked me in some other class that, sir, can we add the pleasure of the lion also? He will also become happier by having a food, maybe hungry lion. Well, if you are that objective, Bentham will be happy with you. Bentham will be very happy with you. Because remember, Bentham's theory is the only theory that can be extended, a theory of ethics. Only theory of ethics that can be extended to even the animals. So as we'll see in all other theory of ethics that we will discuss in our class, ethics is a uniquely human endeavor. But Bentham's theory is the only theory in which you can extend this theory even to the animals, because happiness is always good, and happiness means that happiness of the animals also may be. So many modern philosophers, there is a famous quotation of Bentham. Bentham has said that what is important in ethics is not whether you think or speak. What is important in ethics is that whether you can feel or not. Well, if you can feel pleasure and pain, there is a ethics there. And as far as feeling of pleasure and pain is concerned, even animals can feel the pleasure and pain. So Bentham's theory can take that also into consideration. So that is why you can say many people, many supporters of Bentham these days have tried to extend his idea to the animal ethics, people like Peter Singer. So these people have actually tried to understand animal ethics also, that we must take care of the pleasure and pain of the animals as much as we think about our own pleasure and pain. But so if you are willing to add the pleasure of lion also, then you can do that also in that calculation. Bentham will be very happy with you. But let's not be that objective. Suppose for example, this is the only amount of pleasure, total pleasure 200,000 units. Now in this case, of course, it appears that total pleasure is more than the total pain. So in this case, Bentham may possibly say that, well, it is unfortunate that one person dies, but that can be morally justified. Now that is the important thing. Do you think that this type of calculation can be justified? Well, think about it. Can we make that calculation or not? Now the critics of Bentham will say that no, we don't agree with whole idea of Bentham. They will say ethics is not about calculating pleasure and pain like this. It's not about calculating and comparing the pleasure and pain. They will say that no, this Christian has certain rights, fundamental right to life, for example, which is so important that you cannot compromise that even for the sake of entertainment of 20,000 people. So ethics is not about, you can say, creating maximum pleasure, maximum happiness. Ethics is more about respecting the right of an individual, like in this case, right to life. So think of it, where does your conscience lie? Do you think that Bentham was right, where calculation can be done to decide the morality, or should we simply respect right, forget about the calculation, or forget about the happiness that the majority of the people, large number of people may possibly get? So that is an important question that you have to possibly think about. That is the idea of Bentham in that case again. Now this theory, this case that I have talked about is a very theoretical case, a textbook type of case. Let's take about second important case, a more practical case to understand this conflict, this controversy, this debate between individual and the society. Sir, how SDM Jyoti Moria case justified in ethical manner? Not relevant for this topic, sometimes later. Nimai, sir, according to Bentham's utilitarianism, Jallikattu festival playing with bull of South India is justified. Please explain, sir. What do you think? Bentham will not justify or unjustify. Bentham will say calculate the total amount of pleasure. As I told you, Bentham may not possibly justify that because there is a cruelty. That animals get lots of pain and even people sometimes get pain. People also die in such a case, such you can say games like Jallikattu, etc. But it depends on how much pleasure and how much pain is there in that case. Now let's take a second case to understand this thing. Second case is the case, let's talk about the case of say torture. Let's take the case of torture. Now torture we all know is wrong, bad. What do you think Bentham will say about torture? Well, of course, he will also say that torture is bad. But why is torture bad? Torture is bad because in torture, the person who is tortured gets lots of pain. So that is the main reason for which he will say that torture is bad. Lots of pain is here. But is torture always bad? Can there be a situation where torture can be justified also? Let's talk about that a little. Suppose, for example, just imagine a case. Suppose, for example, you are the police head of your city. And one day early in the morning, you get a very strong intelligence input that there is a person called A who has planted a bomb somewhere in your city, and by evening 6 o'clock, this bomb is going to blast. And this bomb blast, suppose 100 people will die. Now you ask this person that tell me where the bomb is. But he refuses, I don't know where the bomb is. But the intelligence input that you have got is so strong that 90% chance is that he is actually the guilty person. He has planted the bomb, but he is not accepting that. So he is not accepting that, time is passing. Now there is only choice in front of you is that you can torture this person very badly. And if you torture him very badly, then because of the extreme torture, if he turns out to be a guilty person, then because of that extreme torture, he can tell you where the bomb is and you can defuse the bomb and you can save the life of 100 people. But remember always that you are running the risk of at least 10% risk of torturing an innocent person also. Now in this case, if this is the only choice in front of you, then what do you think? Would you torture, would you as a police officer, would you agree to torture this person or not? Now when I ask this question in my class, physical class, then majority of the students simply say, sir, I will torture that person. If you are among those people who agree to torture him, then well, what is the ground on which you decide to agree? Now in this case also when I ask this from my student in the physical classroom, then they also say two important arguments. Some people say, so in this case some people, there are two arguments. If you agree to torture this person, then there can be two arguments for that. Some people will say that by torturing one person you are able to save the life of 100 people, and on that ground you can say it is justified. If that is your argument, then it can be a little troubling argument, as we will see shortly. Now there is a second argument also that people give. Some people say that he is a guilty person, he is a criminal, and well 90% chance is that he is a guilty person, and normally we do not have much problem in torturing a guilty person. We normally agree that okay, he is a guilty person, they must pay the price. Now in order to understand the strength of the Bentham's argument, let us remove the element of guilt altogether. Forget about 90%. It is 100% sure that this person is the guilty person. Suppose there is no 90%, it is 100% sure that he is actually the guilty person. He has actually planted the bomb. In fact, he himself has informed you that he has sent an SMS to you and WhatsApp message to you and email to you, in which he has actually told you that, well, I have planted a bomb somewhere in your city. By the evening 6 o'clock, this bomb is going to blast and at least 100 people will die. In that case, do whatever you can do. Kar lo jo karna hai. Sometimes terrorists torture the terrorists challenge the police authority in that case. So you are challenged by the terrorist that, well, I have planted the bomb, do whatever you can do. If you can save those people, do that. Well, I have done this. So he is 100% guilty for that. But the problem is that he is not in your control. He is hiding somewhere. So from some hiding, he had informed you about the bomb. Now you try all your best to find where the bomb is, but you are not able to find the bomb. Now time is passing. Now in order to find the bomb, you suppose you make an appeal to that person. You make a public appeal to that person through the television channel, to the radio, FM channel, newspaper, etc. And you try to appeal to the conscience of that person. You tell him through these public, you can say, appeal system that, well, please tell where the bomb is. Why do you want to kill 100 people? So much of pain will be there, so much of destruction will be there, so much of property, children will die, old people will die, families will be destroyed. So you try to appeal to the conscience of that person that, please tell us. If you also tell him that if you have some demand, tell us your demand, let us negotiate, let us talk. Why to kill people? So you are trying to appeal to the conscience of that person, but he is not listening. He is not coming out and you are desperate what to do, what to do, what to do. Suddenly suppose there is another person B comes to you and he tells you, the second person B, that I am a psychologist, I am a psychiatrist, and I know that this person is a pure psychopath. He is a maniac. I as a psychologist, I have been treating him for his psychopathy for the last 2 years. So I know his psychology very well. He is a pure psychopath. Who are the psychopaths? Psychopaths are the people who do not have a conscience in a way. Remember, we have talked about conscience earlier, that conscience is something in our mind that, well, prevent us from doing wrong to the others. Forget about killing somebody. If you see somebody being killed in front of you, then we become so disturbed, then perhaps we are not able to sleep on that night. Even then, even if we are not the guilty person, we see somebody killing somebody else, then also we are not able to sleep, we become so disturbed. But psychopaths, on the other hand, are the people, they can kill a person by, say, very brutal manner, by slitting the throat of the person also, and move ahead smiling as if nothing has happened. They do not have that internal control, internal regulator, that feeling of guilt, shame, etc. So the second person B tells you that A is a pure psychopath. Forget about 100 people. Even if 1,000,000 people die, then also his conscience will not shake. He will not bother. So you are just wasting your time by trying to appeal to the conscience of that person. He is not going to listen to you. He is not going to come out. He is not going to tell you where the bomb is. But there is a way. Way is that, because I am a psychologist, I know his psychology so well, so I know that there is a way. What is the way out? The way out is that this person A, this psychopath A, he does not care for anybody in the world. But there is one person in the world whom he loves more than himself also. And that one person is the one young 7-year-old, say, girl. So one young 7-year-old girl, his own daughter. So she is the only person who is, I can say, for whom he loves. She is the only person for whom his heart beats. So now there is a way. Way is that you can bring this girl to your police station, torture her very badly, and live telecast that on a national television. And if he turns out to be guilty person, then he will, when he will see his daughter to be tortured like this, he will never be able to hold himself on. You can come out, and he will come out, he will tell you where the bomb is to prevent the torture of his daughter. He will tell you where the bomb is, you can defuse the bomb and you can save the life of 100 people. Remember, you are still, if you are a first group of people who say that we can torture a person for the sake of 100 people's life, then you are still saving the life of 100 people. Would you be ready to, would you agree to torture that one young girl in that case? Now, when I ask this question in my class, a large number of students say, sir, no, sir, it can't be done. It shouldn't be done. Now, why not? Now, in this case, you can see that the majority of the people will say that no, it cannot be done. But according to Bentham, no, there is nothing wrong in that. It is possible, it is okay, it is morally justified to torture that young person also. But the critics of Bentham will say that no, that this torture is never justified, that this young girl has certain rights, well, that cannot be compromised for anything and all, anything at all. But those of you, for example, if you think that you will not agree to torture this young girl, then let us see, according to Bentham, Bentham will ask you some question then. Then suppose, for example, suppose you don't agree to torture this young girl in the first instance. Now suppose if the bomb is big enough to kill 1,000 people, would you agree to torture this young girl then? If the bomb is big enough to kill 10,000 people, then you torture that, would you torture this girl? If the bomb is big enough to kill 100,000 people, would you torture the girl? Would there be a point when, well, you may think in your mind that, will there be a point when you start thinking that, well, it is very unfortunate that I have to torture, but what to do? There is no way out. I have to do that. Perhaps majority of you may agree for that. Bentham will say this is what moral judgment is. Moral judgment, according to Bentham, is just about a cost benefit analysis. So in this case, what is the cost? This is the cost. Nobody wants to pay the cost. Nobody wants to torture a girl like that. But in this case, it is what is the benefit? This is the benefit. Moral decision making, according to Bentham, is always about making a cost benefit analysis. When the cost is higher, we are not willing to pay. But when the benefits become higher, then we are willing to pay. Suppose, for example, I have a pen in my hand, normal pen that you write with. Suppose, for example, I tell you that I will give you this pen in 100 rupees. Nobody will buy this pen. I'll tell you I will give you 2 pens in 100 rupees. Nobody will buy it. 3 pens in 100 rupees. Nobody will buy it. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At one point of time, perhaps anybody who has the remotest utility of this pen will say or will think that, well, it is a great bargain, and they will be willing to buy. Moral decision making is also like that. That initially when I said that by torturing one young girl, 100 people's life can be saved, then perhaps majority of you might agree, might say, sir, I will not do that. Benefit was small maybe. Now I increase the benefit, 1,000 people's life can be saved. Some of you will say, sir, yes, I can do that. 10,000 people, more of you will agree. So I keep on increasing the benefit. At one point of time, perhaps even the most ardent supporter of the human rights will say that it is unfortunate, but well, we can do that, we have to do that, there is no way out. So this is what Bentham will say, this is what is the idea of the moral judgment according to Bentham. So that is what Bentham is. But according to critiques of Bentham, as I told you, that moral decision making is not about the cost benefit analysis. Moral decision is more about respecting rights of some people like that young girl. Everybody, including that young girl, her rights are so important that we should not compromise that even for the sake of, well, whatever. So is there anybody attended to this classroom who will say that come what may, I will never agree to torture that. I will resign from the job, but torture is wrong, I will not do that. Very few of my students raise their hand, they say, sir, I will never do that, come what may. Even if 1,000 people die, even if you can say big bomb blast, I will do something else, but not this. If you think that you will never do it under any circumstances, then you will be a true critique of Bentham. But that is very difficult for most of us to do. At some point of time, perhaps all of us will agree that, well, it is unfortunate, but nevertheless, we will have to do that. This is what Bentham will say. Moral decision making is about that. So this is the controversy. What is more important? Right of that one young girl is more important, or life of thousands of people is? This is the basic debate between individual rights and common good. So can we, rights of that Christian is more important, or the entertainment of 20,000 people? Rights of that one girl is more important, or life of hundreds of people maybe? So that is a big controversy, that is a big debate that is we are facing in ethics. Every time when we make some moral decision, that debate often comes up. Bentham in all these cases will say that no, individual rights does not matter, common good is more important. For the sake of society, if sometimes individuals suffer, then that suffering can be justified. That is what Bentham will say in that case. So this is the biggest criticism of Bentham. In a way, we can say this criticism that we are talking about here, that this criticism essentially tells us that Bentham's theory is anti-minority. Bentham's theory or utilitarianism is anti-minority, because utilitarianism talks about the greatest happiness for greatest number. Now, if it is greatest happiness for greatest number, then what about those people who are smaller in number? They are the minorities. Can we compromise the rights of a minority for the sake of happiness of the majority? So that is one of the big question in ethics normally, that to what extent we can compromise the rights of a minority. And minority, if you look at it, that who is a minority? Well, who is the biggest minority in the world? Well, individual is the biggest minority in the world. We all are minorities somewhere or other in some way. So, in a Hindu majority India, for example, Muslims are minority. If you go to Tamil Nadu, for example, then Hindi speaking person will be a minority in Tamil Nadu, linguistic minority. So, sometimes we are religious minority, sometimes we are linguistic minority, sometimes we are professional minority, sometimes we are gender minority, sometimes we all are minority in that sense. So, a Tamil speaking person in Delhi will be a linguistic minority, a Hindi speaking people in Bengal will be a linguistic minority. So, at different places, different people are minority. We all are minorities sometimes or the other, somewhere or the other, in some way or the other. And if we believe in this theory, then we all may have to suffer sometimes for the sake of the majority there. So, that is one of the most important, most severe criticism of Bentham's theory, that it does not give enough importance to the rights of the minority. If you make a society purely on the basis of Bentham's theory, then in such a society, minorities may have to suffer a lot. So, that is the first debate about moral philosophy. Now, think about it yourself. Where does your conscience lie? What do you think, that rights of the, you can say individual is more important or good of the society is more important? Think about it. We'll keep on talking about these questions throughout the course later on, also tomorrow and the day after. That is the first important criticism of Bentham's theory. Now we'll talk about the second important criticism. Write down further. Single scale of value. Write down firstly. According to Bentham, values differ from each other. Values differ from each other only in quantitative terms. Values differ from each other only in quantitative terms. Thus, all the values should be converted into a single scale of value, so that they can be objectively compared. For Bentham, this scale was hedonistic scale. For Bentham, this scale was hedonistic scale, but for many modern utilitarians, this scale can be a more objective monetary scale. they hold that all the values should be converted in terms of money. All the values should be converted in terms of money so that they can be objectively compared. So that they can be objectively compared. So that they can be objectively compared. Now, this is the next important thing. The idea here is that as we have seen in the previous class, that Bentham say that every value differ from each other only in terms of quantitative difference. So, all the values should be converted into a single scale so that they can be objectively compared. For him, of course, it was hedonistic scale, means scale of pleasure and pain. But as I told you in the previous class also, that today nobody believes in that original idea of Bentham's hedonistic scale. So, his supporters today say that this scale that he was talking about can be a more objective monetary scale, where all the values should be evaluated in terms of money. Because if you look at money, the most important thing about, beautiful thing about money is that money allows us to make comparison between anything with anything else. Suppose, for example, you cannot compare this marker that I have in my hand with this mobile that we have in my other hand. They cannot be compared. So, that of course, they are two very different things, but if you convert both of them in terms of money, then comparison is possible. That this value of this marker may be 20 rupees and value of your mobile may be 20,000 rupees. Now, there can be comparison that is small in number, that is large in number. So, money makes it possible for us to compare the value of everything. In terms of money, we can compare value of a mobile with the value of a pen, with the value of the AC, with the camera, with the building, with the car. Everything can be compared with everything else in terms of money, that which is higher in value and which is lower in value. So, money as a measure of value. This is what his supporters often today talk about. Now, to understand money as a measure of value, let us take some example. This is another very, very important concept is there in the modern moral philosophy. So, in order to understand money as a measure of value, let us take some example. Think about these examples and tell me what do you think is right and wrong in such cases. Now, one example that I will take about, first example that I will take about is a real case actually, in contrast to all other cases that we have discussed earlier. So, all other cases that we had discussed earlier, starting from the first trolley problem to this torture case, they were all hypothetical situations. So, I just asked you to imagine yourself in that situation and then think how would you behave. So, there were hypothetical situations, but this case that I am going to talk about now is a real case that actually happened in America in around 1960s, early 60s, and this case concerned with the Ford company, the car makers. Now, in early 1960s, Ford company had come out with a small car, hatchback car called Ford Pinto. A very famous case it was, and a lot of debate has happened about this case, all in the field of moral philosophy, general philosophy, economics, politics. Everywhere this case has been extensively debated in the world, that in terms of moral importance of this idea, this case. So, let us talk about that case, a very famous case. It is related to the Ford Pinto, a small hatchback car that was launched in America in around 1960s. Now, this car was a very good car, very popular car also. So, within a very few small amount of time, span of time, millions of units of this car was sold. So, it was a very good car in every way, but there was a very popular car, very good car, but there was one problem. Problem was that whenever some accidents used to happen and there was some impact from the rear side on the car, then sometimes the fuel tank of the car used to catch fire. And in this fire every year some people used to die and some people used to get injured. Now initially people thought that it might be a normal accident, because in accidents sometimes cars do catch fire or people do die sometimes. So initially people thought that it might be normal accidents, but so nobody noticed that. But once it so happened that there were a young engineer was there, his car also caught fire in a similar fashion, and it caught fire, and but he was saved, he did not die. But this engineer was a very inquisitive engineer, very curious engineer, Khurafati as we call in Hindi. So what he did, he tried to find out why did my car catch fire. So he opened the car and he started looking for the reason for that, and he finally found the reason. Reason was that in the fuel tank of the car there was a small design fault was there. It was because of this design fault that, well, these fires used to happen. Now this young man filed a case in the Supreme Court in America, saying that had it been a normal accident, then nobody is responsible for that. Accidents do happen, cars do catch fire, people do die, you can't do anything. So had it been a normal accident, then nobody is accountable for that. But since these fire happened because of the design fault of the car, so the car maker, Ford company, must be held accountable for that, claiming that he demanded heavy compensation. And then after, the actual case came out in light. The actual case was that the engineers of the Ford company, they knew that there is a design fault. It's not something that they did not know. They knew that there is a design fault, and they had found actually a solution for that also. What was the solution? Suppose, for example, solution was something like this one. They invented a valve, and they thought that if this valve is fitted into that car, then it will, it can be the fault that is there, which can be corrected. Now the engineers of the Ford company went to the management of the Ford company, suggesting that, with a suggestion that let us recall all the cars from the market, let us fit this valve into all of that so that this problem can be corrected. Now the management of the Ford company make a calculation on the basis of Bentham's idea, that should it be done or not, is it morally, it is justified or not. How did they make a calculation? They made the calculation like this one, that suppose, for example, they found that total cost of one valve was $11. Total cost of manufacturing of the valve, cost of recalling the car to the company, labor cost of fitting the valve into the car, and cost of sending the car back to the customer. So total value turned out to be $11. They multiplied that with the number of cars that needed that fitting, and they found that total cost turned out to be $135.5 million. So total cost came out to be, so this was the total cost, total cost came out to be $135.5 million. Now they calculated benefits also. How did they calculate benefit? They calculated benefit by making this thing, that one life that can be possibly saved by the fitting of this valve, they valued that as $200,000. And one injury that can be prevented because of the fitting of this valve, they valued that as, say, $67,000 or $64,000. And they made a very complex statistical calculation that how long this car, how many accidents happen every year. Now you have some data about that also on an average. So on an average, how many accidents happen every year, how many people die in these accidents, and how long these cars are going to be on the roads of America. So by making a very complex statistical calculation, they found that total life that could be saved by the fitting of the valve turned out to be around 180 life and 180 or so injury. And they multiplied both of them, and they found that the total cost came out to be $49.5 million. $49.5 million, that would be the total benefit. Now in this case, benefit was much less than the cost. So the management of the company sat on the proposal, and this proposal was never executed. Now the question here is that while making such a decision, do you think that this type of calculation is justified calculation? Now, before we jump to the conclusion, let me give you one more information. That this can say Ford companies claimed that this data that we have taken, that one life is equivalent to $200,000 and one injury is equivalent to $67,000. They claim that it is not an arbitrary data that we have cooked up. They claim that this data is actually government data that we have taken from the government office itself. So a few months ago, from this case, well, the traffic department of American government, US government, they had made a calculation that every person who dies in a road accident, what is the value of that person to the US economy. Suppose, for example, if I die today in a road accident, now today if I am alive, then I am a working person. As a working person, I earn money and I spend that money also. Both of that, through that, I contribute to the economy of my country. So they calculated that what is my total contribution to the GDP of my country. And after my retirement, well, I will take some money from the economy again in the form of pension benefit, medical cost, etc. So how much I will consume from the GDP, how much I will contribute and how much I will consume from that. Making all these calculations, the traffic departments of the US government had calculated that every person who dies in a road accident costs $200,000 to the US economy, and every person who gets injured in the US in a road accident, that costs around $67,000 to the US economy. So the Ford company claimed that we have not cooked up the data, we have simply taken the data from the traffic department, and on that basis we have made the calculation. So they took a moral high ground that we did not work for our own self-interest, we have simply taken the government data and make a calculation. Now the question is that, do you think that this type of calculation is justified while making such a decision? Now you can imagine here that when this case came out in light, then it created a storm in the American society. That everybody started talking about that case, editorials were written in the newspaper, well, articles were written in the newspaper, TV discussions started happening, Arnab Goswami of America started shouting on the television. America also has the Arnab Goswami, So Arnab Goswami, they started shouting, nation wants to know, and all those things that they speak, So they started having all the debate. Now, in this case, you can say two objections were raised. Some people said that $200,000 is too less for a human life. If you think that $200,000 is too less for a human life, then Bentham may possibly agree with you. And Bentham will ask you, tell me how much. Suppose, for example, I make it $2 million. Will that be right? $20 million. Will that be right? $200 million. Will that be right? Will there be a point where you can say that, well, it is okay for us to make such a calculation, it is justified? If you say so, then you are still a supporter of Bentham, you are still making a calculation. So, if you are still, if you are still can say supporter of Bentham in that case. So, that is because Bentham will say that, okay, make a better calculation. But important thing is that can you compare life with the one? So, if you think that money is less, then it is justified, Bentham will say. But that is one argument which is consistent with the idea of Bentham. But some other people will say that no, this whole idea of calculation is wrong. You cannot put a monetary value on the human life. You cannot compare life with money. So that is the second type of criticism, which is the real criticism of Bentham's theory. Now, if you belong to that category, that money cannot be compared, life cannot be compared in terms of money, then Bentham will only say that you are being a sentimental fool. Because in practical life, real life, we actually make such comparison. Don't you make such comparison that how much my life is worth? When you buy life insurance, for example, then do you not make a calculation that how much your life is worth? Or forget about that thing, forget about the life insurance. Just take a small example. Suppose you are going to purchase a car, and same car that you are trying to purchase, it has two models, say A and B. Now suppose A model A, it has some extra safety feature like extra airbag, which can save your life at the time of some accident, which this car does not have. Everything else is same, but only extra safety, and because of that extra safety feature, this car is costlier by say rupees 50,000 than this car. Now while making this decision, do you not make a calculation that this extra safety that you are getting for your own life, is it worth 50,000 rupees or not? If you think that extra safety to your life is worth 50,000 rupees, then perhaps you will be buying car A, model A. But if you think that no, that extra safety is not worth 50,000 rupees, then you will perhaps buy car B. Do you not make such a calculation? In practical life, we actually make such calculations. But problem with us is that, Bentham will say, problem with us is that we are brought up in such a sentimental environment that the moment somebody asks us that can we compare life with the money, we simply jump to the conclusion, no, it can't be done. Bentham will say, don't jump to the conclusion, don't be sentimental. Be rational, be logical, be calculative. Calculate, and then after only that, so be explicit. What you implicitly do that, be explicit about that, there is nothing wrong in that. This is what Bentham's supporters will say, and that is what Bentham's critics will say. Let me say a question. Sir, can we use examples of people of so-called higher caste throwing stone, humiliating, mocking, etc., so-called lower caste people in the critiques of the theory? No, you cannot use that, because lower caste people who get the pain, that will be much more than humiliation and mockery and stone pain, etc., which would be perhaps more than the happiness that the higher caste people take. So it will be consistent, Bentham will unjustify such acts. Nayan, Biswajit, there are benefits is more than cost, then why it is not implemented? If benefits are more than the cost, then it will be implemented. This is what Bentham is saying. So this is one important example that we talked about. So think about it, where does your conscience lie, that can we make such calculation or not? Let us take some more practical example. Another example, that is my favorite example in this scenario, is the case of, say, gift. Now gifts are the beautiful things, we all love gifts. Now suppose for example, there are, let's take one example of a gift. Suppose for example, there are two people, say A and B, two of my friends. Suppose for example, they have some occasion in their family and they invite some birthday, some anniversary, etc., and they invite me in their party. Now while going to this person's house, suppose before going to his house, I go to the market and I purchase a very good gift for him, which I think that my friend will like. And suppose the value of that gift is, say, 1,000 rupees. And to this person, on the other hand, I do not buy any gift from him. I give him 1,000 rupees in cash. Now, what do you think is a better choice? If you are the recipient of the gift, then what would you like to be? Would you like to be A or B? Would you like to receive a gift, or would you like to take the money? Now, when I ask this question in my physical classroom, then a lot of us can say various answer comes up. Majority of the students tell me that, sir, I will prefer to have the money. And then I say, now you support Bentham's theory. But there are some students, and you also, there may be some who will prefer to have gift. Suppose you are the ones who prefer to have gift. Now, problem with the gift is that Bentham will say that gift has big problems. Suppose for example, it is your birthday, and suppose you invite me for your birthday, and before going to your house, for example, suppose your venue of the party, suppose I purchase a very good gift for you. In gift, I purchase a very good book for you. Of course, a teacher should give a good book to his students. So I purchase a good book for you, and that I gift to you. And later on, it turns out that you had already read that book. You had already read that book. In that case, don't you think? Yes, somebody said A already. Both of that. A, sir, B is better. So first of all, A. So suppose for example, I give a book to you, and it turns out that you had already read that book long ago. Will that not be a complete wastage of money in that case? So instead of book, had I given you 1,000 rupees in cash, then you might have purchased something that would have given more happiness for you. By giving a gift, I had actually made a judgment about you, what makes you happier. That judgmental attitude is a wrong thing, Bentham will say. So in this case, you can say that by gifting you a book, I have actually destroyed the value. Had I given you the money in place of that, then perhaps that would have made you happier. you could have purchased something that would have made you further happier. Gift has a big problem. It happened, I will tell you one of my personal experience. A few years ago, it happened in my family that in Delhi where I stay, there is an apartment in which I am living, and in that building, there are 50 apartments are there. 50 flats are there and 50 families live there, and out of these 50 families there are at least 35 young children are there of my daughter's age group. So every month at least 2 or 3 birthdays happen there on an average, and in all these birthdays my daughter is invited. She is a very popular girl in that society, so she is always invited in that. So every month we know that at least 2 or 3 birthdays will be there where she will go there and we'll have to purchase a gift for her. So it's a very normal thing. But one day it so happened that there was a lady was there. She came to invite my daughter to her son's birthday. That was a very normal thing. But with her invitation, there was a very strange request was also there, which was written on the card in bold and underlined letter. No gift, please. And orally she also told us, please do not send any gift. I asked her, why do you want me not to send a gift? I told her that sending a gift is a part of socialization also. So when I'm not only giving gift to you, I'm teaching my daughter also that when you go to a party, then how to carry a gift. So children do not want to give anything. They always want to take something from others. But we have to teach them that in life you have to give also. So you don't only take, but you give also. So I'm teaching her also to give a gift to somebody when you go to a party, how to carry a gift, how to give a gift and all. So why are you asking me not? That's a part of socialization, that's a part of growing up. So why do you ask me not to send any gift? To which she said that there are two practical problems are there. First is that she said that we have a small 3 BHK apartment. That we have a small 3 BHK apartment, and well, we have big joint family, and every year almost 30-40 gifts come up, big gifts, and we don't know where to keep that. But a bigger problem is that every year more than one people end up giving the same gift. Because in our local neighborhood market there are only 2 gift shops are there. One small and one bigger one, and most of us go to the bigger gift shop. So just imagine, so all of us go there in the same gift shop. Suppose for example 40 people are going to the same shop to purchase a gift for the same recipient within the same budget. Of course, we all have the similar budget that we all in a society when you are living, then there is some sort of implicit agreement that how much money you spent on the gift. So if the 40 people are purchasing the same gift for the same recipient within the same budget from the same shop, then what is the probability that more than one people will end up buying, more than 1 or 2, 3 people may end up buying the same gift? Very high. So she told me every year 2, 3, 4, 5 people end up giving, 3 people give chess board, some people give the other board game. That is a complete waste. We don't know what to do with that. Even maid servants are not willing to take that. Because what will they do with a chess board, for example? So it's a complete wastage. We have to throw it away. So don't waste the money on that. Please send the child. Let the children enjoy the party. Forget about the gift. Now in this case, had I told her that I will send you the money rather than gift, for example, then do you think that she would have any problem in that case? Of course not. She will say, yes, please. That would have been the response of that lady. So in this situation, you can see that perhaps money would have been a better choice. She would not have been objection. She would have welcomed the money rather than the gift. That is where the problem of gift comes up. So idea is that Bentham will say that if you give gift, then you are actually destroying the value. If you give the money, then well, that will preserve the value. That is how judgment should be done about. So idea of the single scale of value is that everything, suppose for example, life also must have a dollar value, or an injury should have a dollar value, or a gift should have a dollar value. To evaluate and compare that, everything, even things like say parental love, should have a dollar value. Parental love, that is also an interesting thing. Suppose for example, just think of one more small case. Suppose for example, there are 2 couples are there, A and B. Suppose both of them are working couples, and they in their family, suppose there is an old person, suppose father, my parents are there, very old people, and old person, parents, father for example, that very sick, always medical conditions are there, always need some care, but these 2 people are working. So they do not have enough time to take care of their father. Of course, maid servant is there to take care of their needs, but they cannot fulfill the need of the father the way father deserves. So he suffers also. Whole day the father keeps on in pain and agony, keeps on waiting for the children to come back home. And both the couples also at their office, they are always worried that how is father at home, how is father at home. So all of them are going through very bad, can say unhappy condition in that case. Now A is a couple who decides that since father is suffering so much at home, so let's send our father to an old age home. So they select a old age home, a very high class, a good quality old age home. And then all the facilities are there. Good airy room is there, AC is there, good food is there, nursing facility is there, medical facility is there, swimming pool is there, the card game rooms are there, the gym is there, instructors are there for the old people. So everything is there, and other old people are there to give company to them. So all the facilities are there, and they spend lots of money on that. They, on the other hand, second couple, they keep their parents at their own home and, well, suffer all the time. Now, what is a better choice? If you are that person, what would you like to do with your parents maybe? Would you keep them home and suffer, or send them to old age home and pay lots of money for that? Now, in this case, when I ask this question in my class, a majority of the students say, sir, I would like to be B. I will prefer to keep them at home. If you are like that, then Bentham will say you are just being a sentimental fool. So if that makes people happier, then spend money and create happiness. Why not? So because if your father had sent you to a hostel, for example, where a lot of pain, difficulties are there, had you been at home all the time, then perhaps more care, more happiness would have been there for you. But your father sends you to a hostel, well, for the sake of your happiness, your future maybe, then why can't you send your father to an old age home also for his happiness maybe? Not that I am trying to instigate you people against your father, but will that be not better just for the sake of your happiness? If they are sending you to a hostel, for example, then for the sake of his happiness, why can't send him to the old age home where perhaps more care might be provided to him maybe? So somebody said A. Well, you understand now Bentham's theory. So the idea is that how much money you are willing to spend for your father's upkeep in the old age will be the sign of your love to your father. Your love can be quantified that yes, this is the amount of money that I am spending for my father. So everything, education for example, will have a dollar value. So everything should have a dollar value. This is the meaning of the term single scale of value. That even a life should have a dollar value, a valve also should have a dollar value, this marker also will have a dollar value, mobile also, and injury also, gift also, love also, relationship also, education also, everything should have a dollar value. That is the idea of the single scale of value, which makes it possible for us to make an easy comparison between the various values. This is what Bentham will say, and his supporters will say. But change the paragraph and then after write further. But according to his critics, there are some values. But according to his critics, there are some values which are so fundamental. There are some values which are so fundamental that they cannot be converted. To any other scale which are so fundamental that they cannot be converted to any other scale without losing their essence. Without losing their essence. So this is second important thing. The idea here is that according to the critiques of Bentham, we will talk about these critiques in tomorrow, maybe, or day after tomorrow's class. So critiques of Bentham will say that if you convert all of that into money, then something very essential will be lost in that conversion. And what is lost in that conversion is what ethics should be more concerned about. What we can convert? Of course, we can convert. Everything has a dollar value. So we do spend money on life also, injury also, gift also, love also, relationship also, everything cost in a way. So there is a monetary value. But according to the critiques of Bentham, that what has converted into money, that is economics. And what cannot be converted is what ethics should be more concerned about. So the critics of Bentham will say that what Bentham has done, he had confused ethics with economics. So he had actually converted ethics into economics. Bentham will say that, well, there is no difference between ethics and economics. Ethical value and economic values are same. So according to, but the critics of Bentham will say that no, ethics is far away from something. If you convert everything in terms of money, then something very important, very essential will be lost. And what is lost in that conversion is what ethics should be more concerned about. So for example, if you give the gift, you can say, of course you spend, if you give gift to somebody, then of course you spend some money in that. But do you think that money is the only thing that you give in gift, or is there something more than money that you give to somebody when you are giving that person a gift? So, or you can say love. If you look at it, then you can say, of course, your father also. Take the reverse example. Your parents must have spent lots of money on your upkeep, your upbringing in a way. But do you think money is the only thing that they have spent on you? Suppose, for example, in one can say day, in extreme anger, your father tells you that I have done so much for you since my childhood, and you ask him, okay, tell me how much I can pay you for that. Can you pay him for everything that he has done for you? Is that only thing that he has done, how much money he has spent on you? So can everything have monetary value in that sense? Can be complete monetary equivalence is possible in that case? Bentham will say that is possible. Critics of Bentham will say that is impossible. So that is the idea. But idea here is that this idea of everything having monetary value is very common in these times. Our society is actually moving in that direction where we can say money has become more and more, well, prominent source of value, measurement of value. Look at gift, for example. In Delhi, for example, when I go to somewhere in some ceremony, for example, some marriage, for example, then almost 60-70% of the time, well, I see the people who give gift that envelope that they give. They don't give gift now. They have that envelope in which 1 rupee is already pasted. That Shagunwala 1 rupees. And then after, depending on how much value you put in your relationship, sometimes you put 500 rupees in that envelope and sometimes 5,000 rupees. Are you not evaluating your relationship in terms of money? How much your relationship is worth? So Bentham will say that is the right direction, this is what we should do. But critics of Bentham will say that no, something else is more important and ethics should be more about that something else, which cannot be equivalent, cannot be equated with money. Let me see this question, what it was. Shubhankar, if I gift money to someone and if that person consume liquor and other intoxicant by using that money, in that case there are costs only, isn't it? In that case there may be happiness initially but pain later. First of all, who are you to decide what is pain for that person? Let that person decide. You are making a judgment. So non-judgmental is an important part of the science of morality. So when you gift money to that person, forget about how is he going to, let him decide what gives him more happiness maybe. Isn't it? So this is what Bentham will say. Don't make a judgment about. So if he gets happiness in consuming liquor, then who are you to say that's a bad happiness? As I told you that we should not make judgment about the other's happiness. Don't say that his happiness is bad because he consumes liquor and your happiness is good because you consume Ganga Jal maybe. So don't be that value judgmental. Bentham will say, give money and let him decide what is going to make him happier in that case. Now, this idea that we have discussed here, it is a very important. There can be some question on that. A few years ago, there was a question in the UPSC exam. That question was that this was UPSC question. Question was that what do you mean by materialistic value? What do you mean by materialistic value? How does it differ from the ethical value? Something like this one. Exact word may be different, but that was the essence of the question, that what do you mean by materialistic value and how does it differ from the ethical value? Now, in this answer to that question, you have to write this answer in two parts. First part will be this. Materialistic value. So you have to define what is the meaning of the term materialistic value. How do you define materialistic value? Materialistic value is the one in which we try to evaluate everything in terms of some material term like money. Money is something that can be a material term like money, which can be compared and calculated, quantified, measured, observed, empirically seen maybe. So that is what materialistic value is there. So you can define materialistic value in that language, and then after you can give some example of that, any of these examples. That is materialistic value. So half of your answer should be about materialistic value, and the other half would be about ethical value, which we will discuss in a later class. So what is lost in that conversion like ethics or ethical value, we will discuss that in some later class later on, a few days, maybe day after tomorrow's class maybe. There we will see what is that ethical value which Bentham missed. Now according to Bentham, materialistic value is the only value that exists. Money as the measure of that value. So even today you can find many people around you also for whom money is everything. All values are contained in the money. Everything they count in terms of money, even including their relationships. So Bentham's idea gives a language to such people that yes, money is important, money is the source of value that makes us better in a way. That is the idea of the single scale of value that Bentham talked about. So that is all about Bentham's theory, both positive as well as negative aspect of his theory. Now if you look at all these things that we have discussed about, both the positive and the negative of his theory, then you can appreciate that his theory has been extremely influential theory of ethics in a way. Extremely influential theory, both positively as well as negatively, because his theory has led to a lot of debate in the moral philosophy about what morality should be. So very influential theory, extremely criticized theory as well. Now if you look at Bentham as personal, as an individual, as a person, then you will see that as a person also Bentham was a very, you can say, eccentric person in a way. He not only proposed this idea of cost benefit analysis as the basis of moral decision, but he actually lived his whole life on the basis of similar cost benefit analysis. And because of that, his personal life was also a very unusual life in that sense. Because first important unusual consequence of this cost benefit, this calculative nature that he had, was that he did not have any close personal friend in his life. A great supporter, collaborator, colleague, intellectual, you can say co-traveler maybe, but no culture, no close friend. Because in our life, we all have somebody in our life who are good for nothing. They can never help you for anything, but still their presence around us, we feel good about that. So they have sentimental value in our life. But Bentham said those sentimental values are bad values. So he said that no, relationship must always be made on the basis of a cost benefit analysis. Only that relationship is important in which both of us are beneficial for each other. So that is one. Otherwise relationship are. So in this sense he had no personal friend, close friend in a way, like we all have. Not only that, one important consequence of his idea of cost benefit analysis was that he, you can say, throughout his life he did not marry. Perhaps he might have made a calculation that cost of marriage is bigger than the benefit of marriage. So on that ground perhaps he did not marry. So he was a personal life, he was a loner, no close friend, no family, but strong supporters, collaborators, colleagues, but not a close friend in a way. So that type of life he had lived throughout. Now if you look at him as a person also, he was a very eccentric person. He died almost 200 years ago, 1834, almost 190 years ago. So he died almost 200 years ago, but if you want to meet him, then you can meet him even today. He is the only philosopher from the past who is with us even today. There is an interesting story about him that before he died, and he died at a very old age, almost 84 years of age or so. When he died, before he died, he asked this question from himself that what can be the possible utility of a dead body? Everything must have a utility. So, and he thought that there can be only two utility of a dead body can possibly be. One utility can be that the dead body should be donated for the medical research. medical research, so that the doctors can dissect the body and find out some important insight about the human anatomy and all. He was strongly against the religious people who destroy their dead body. So Hindus burn their bodies, the dead bodies, and the Muslims and Christians bury that in, and that is also a destruction. So he said the body should not be destroyed like that, body must be utilized for medical purpose. Number one, today its equivalent can be donation of the organs. So that can be one utility of a body. And second utility of the dead body could be that if the body is the body of a great person, then his dead body must be preserved and kept as a source of inspiration for the future generation. So future generation. And he put himself into this second category. And he wrote in his will that after my death, my body should not be destroyed. It should be embalmed, it should be preserved, and it should be kept in the University College of London, which he was one of the premier college of London University, which he was the founder of, one of the founders of. So in that University College of London, he willed that my dead body should be kept, preserved and kept as a source of inspiration for the future generation. And according to his will, well, his body was actually preserved, it was embalmed, and it was kept in a glass case, a glass box, vacuum, in which his body is sitting on a chair wearing original cloth that he was wearing at that time with the parallel legs. So he is sitting there on that the glass box even today. There is another interesting original cloth that he used to wear at that time. Now there is another interesting story about his body, maybe that even after all the precaution that was taken in the preservation of his body, some problem remained in the preservation of his head. And after some time, his head started degenerating. So because of that, his head was ultimately cut off and it was replaced with a wax head. So today if you go there, then his body is the actual body in the flesh and bone, and his head is a wax head above there. His original head also, after cutting it off, it was not destroyed further. It was further embalmed and it was kept on the same glass case box between his legs on the ground. So today if you see there, go there, then you find one body and two head. One wax head on his torso and the second original head, actual head, between his leg on the ground. That you can even now see. There is another interesting story about him, that after almost 20 years after his death, once it so happened that the students of the University College of London once stole his original head. And then after they started demanding, there was some long standing demand of the students of hostel students of University of London, that the authorities were not meeting. So these students started demanding that if you fulfill our demands, then we will return this head, otherwise we will not. A lot of bargaining happened, a lot of negotiation happened, and after all the bargaining and negotiation, all the demands of these students were met before they could return the head. So we can see that Bentham fulfilled his utility even after his death. He was beneficial for the students of the University College of London. That was the personality of Jeremy Bentham. You know, even today there is an organization called International Bentham Society. So every year, once in a year, a meeting of that society takes place in the University College of London, where his dead body is taken as an attendee, and his attendance is marked that Jeremy Bentham present but not voting. Of course, he cannot vote, but he can still be present there, presides at meeting as his body, as his own representative. So that is the personality of Jeremy Bentham in that case. So sometimes when you happen to go to London sometimes, then do spare some time and go to University College of London and say hi to that person and get inspired by him. This is what he wanted from you. So that was the personality of Jeremy Bentham. Sir, if one patient denied to take medicine as it does not make him happy, but doctors or nurse force him for taking medicine as it is necessary for the patient, then also according to Bentham theory is it unethical? No, because ultimately benefit is more important than the pain. Of course, if you force that person, then benefit will be there and pain is also there, but benefit is more than the cost. So in this case, it is possible, it is okay for us to force him to take the medicine, Bentham will say. So this is the idea of Bentham, this is the life of Bentham in that case. You know, at the time of Bentham, there was one very strong criticism that was leveled against Bentham also, was that there is the old, you can say, question in philosophy, Western philosophy, that which life is a better life? Life of a Socrates, who is always dissatisfied, or life of a fool who are always satisfied? Life of a, so this was the old question that was asked by Plato for the first time, student of Socrates. Which life is a better? Socrates dissatisfied or fool satisfied? Because you know about Socrates, perhaps all of you may be aware that Socrates was the wisest person in Athens. But he always used to say that I do not know anything. I don't know. So there is a famous quotation of Socrates that he said that only difference between me and the other so-called wise people in Athens is that they do not know anything, but they do not know that they do not know anything. I also do not know anything, but I know that I do not know anything. That makes me a little better than all of them. So the idea is that only knowledge that I have is the knowledge of my ignorance, that I don't know. So that is, so he was always dissatisfied. So Plato asked this question. So he was quite knowledgeable person, but he was always unhappy. Fools, on the other hand, they do not know anything, but they are always happy and satisfied with their lot. So look, they are always confident about themselves. Again, look at the face of Donald Trump, for example. Always happy, satisfied, and all those things. Does not know, but even then, he is the last authority on everything that he thinks he is. So, which life is a better life? Life of a Socrates, dissatisfied, or fool, satisfied? Now, Bentham's critics lower that debate to a slightly lower level, I would say. That which life is, Bentham's critics ask this question, which life is a better life? Life of a human dissatisfied or life of a pig satisfied? Humans dissatisfied or pigs satisfied? You know, humans, we human being, we are much better than any other animal in the world, but still we are always unhappy. We always want to be someone which we are not. Pigs, on the other hand, well, they spend the whole of their life in the dirt and filth, etc. But even then, they are quite happy and satisfied with their life. Which life is a better life? Given a choice, which life would you like to choose for yourself? Left or right? Well, perhaps many of you will say that I will prefer to have left. But what do you think Bentham will say, which life is a better life? Perhaps all of you will be able to say now, Bentham will say that right is the better thing. So he will say, what is the purpose? Because ultimate purpose of life is what? Happiness. So why, what is the important, what is the good about being Socrates if that makes you unhappy? Be a fool, that makes you happy. Be a pig if that makes you happy. In ancient India also, we had a similar philosophy, Charvak philosophy. You must have heard that famous statement of Charvaks, that yavat jivet sukham jivet rinam kritva ghritam pivet. So as long as you live with happiness. There is no life after this. So even if you have to drink, if you have to take loan, but drink ghee. Perhaps drinking ghee was the highest happiness at that time. Today it leads to obesity, but then perhaps it was happiness. So even if you have to take a loan, then take a loan, drink ghee and be happy. Happiness is the only goal that we should aspire for. Bentham also said the similar thing. Happiness alone matters. Nothing else matters in life. Because of that, his critics often used to say that his theory is should better be characterized as pig philosophy. Yes, this was a term that was actually used by his critics to criticize his theory, that Bentham's theory is not a human philosophy. More than human, it should be considered as a pig philosophy. It requires us to be like a pig, where always keep on looking for the happiness, even if that makes us to be in our, spend our life in dirt and filth also. So that is what is this type of criticism. During his lifetime also, his critics used to say that Bentham theory is a pig philosophy rather than the human philosophy. So that was a type of criticism that was leveled against his theory in a way. So that is what Bentham say. Now in order to handle all these criticism, the first two criticism and this third one for being a pig philosophy, the second great utilitarian philosopher, he tried to answer all these questions, whom we will discuss now. So second great utilitarian philosopher was John Stuart Mill. So next we will talk about Mill, because Mill was the person who tried to answer all these critical questions that was raised against Bentham's theory. So Mill is another second most important philosopher. Some people consider him as the greatest philosopher in the field of utilitarianism. So next we will talk about John Stuart Mill's idea about the utilitarian philosophy. Now if you look at Mill here, John Stuart Mill, then Mill, first of all, Mill was the son of James Mill, who was a personal friend and collaborator and colleague of Jeremy Bentham, a co-founder of the theory of utilitarianism along with Jeremy Bentham. So in this sense we can say that he was one generation below Bentham and directly related to Bentham. His father was a close associate of Jeremy Bentham, and his father James Mill himself was a great intellectual of his time. I have mentioned his name in the previous class also, that he was one of the important officer of the India House in London at that time. He was the person, his father James Mill, he was Stuart Mill, but James Mill his father. So James Mill, his father, was the person who was the first person who wrote a history of British India. He was the person who divided the Indian history into three parts: ancient, medieval and modern. Ancient India of the Hindu India, medieval India when Muslim influence was more dominant, and modern India, the European influence more important, British particularly. So he divided India into Indian history into three parts. That division is still accepted by most of the people in India. So James Mill himself was a great philosopher, a historian and administrator. He was the person who actually sent Lord Macaulay to India to codify the Indian law and write IPC and CRPC. So James Mill himself was a great philosopher. He was also co-founder of utilitarian philosophy along with Jeremy Bentham. So James Mill, he brought up his son John Stuart Mill purely on the basis of utilitarian philosophy. He was just equally a strong believer in the utilitarian philosophy of the calculation of cost and benefit. So he and his friend Bentham, both of them combined together, brought up the child, the John Stuart Mill, purely on the basis of utilitarian philosophy. And because of that, his childhood, John Stuart Mill, his childhood was a very unusual childhood, and his bringing up was an experimental bringing up. That how the children should be brought up, this is what they experimented on the basis of on the basis of the utilitarian philosophy in that sense. So this is what John Stuart Mill was brought up in. So because of this type of experimental bringing up, his childhood was a very unusual childhood. One important unusual thing about him was that John Stuart Mill was never sent to school by his father, because his father James thought excuse me. So his father James Mill thought that schools kill the intellect of the children. They make people zombies, they stuff information into that, ratification as we call it, memorizes, rote memory only. So they kill the intellect of the people, they do not inspire the creativity of the people or the original thinking of the people. So even today there are many people who believe in a similar manner. You must have heard about such people who say, there was a person called Ivan Illich. He has written a book also called De-Schooling Society. So schools often make us into a mold, type of robot, type of zombies, where all the information is stuffed inside us and we simply grow up to become a conformist person. So his father also thought that schools make people zombies, robot. So he never sent his child to school. He was completely home taught at his home only under the supervision of his father James Mill. So he was one of the very few philosophers of that age who did not have any formal schooling. He did not go to a school, college or university. But he was a person of very high intellect. He was a child prodigy, John Stuart Mill. It is said that he started learning ancient Greek language at around 2 years of age. And he started learning ancient Latin language by around 4 years of age. He has written in his autobiography that I never remember that when did I learn, I can say, Greek language. Greek was as natural to me as English was. So by 4-5 years of age, he started learning Latin language. And by 8-9 years of age, he has read all the ancient books of ancient Greek, all the books of ancient Greek and Latin language, books by Pythagoras or Herodotus, Horace or Hippocrates or Aristotle, Plato or Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epicurus, Zeno, all the great philosophers of one minute. So he had already read all the great philosophers of that age by that time by the age of, you can say, 8, 9 or so. And by 11 years of age, he wrote his first book. John Stuart Mill I am talking about. 11 years of age, he wrote his first book. And the name of that book was An Encyclopedia of English Law. Think of it, 11 years of age, and he had written it. We are the people, on the other hand, at 11 years of age, many of us even don't even know the meaning of the term encyclopedia. And here was a person who had written an encyclopedia at the age of 11. That was the type of intellectual ability that, and by middle teenage, 15-16 years of age, he was already recognized as a leading intellectual of the English speaking world. Everybody in the English speaking world knew that there is a great intellectual called John Stuart Mill by middle teenage. That was the type of intellectual ability that he had. So, but perhaps he was not able to carry the burden of that intellect. That by around 19 years of age, he suffered from his first mental breakdown. He recovered from that, but then after throughout his life, he had many psychological problems because of, maybe I don't know what was it, but he did suffer from lots of psychological disturbance throughout the life. In his childhood, he was physically very weak, John Stuart Mill, physically very weak person, but his father, James, allowed him only one physical activity, that every day early in the morning, his father used to take him for a long walk. And during that long walk, his father used to give him lectures on philosophy. So even walking must have two benefits. One is physical benefit when you walk, and second benefit is the lecture, is when you listen to the lectures given on philosophy. And while coming back from the walking, he used to ask him to repeat the lecture of the previous day. Revisions also should be there. That was the controlled intellectual environment in which he was brought up. He was not allowed to mix with any child in the neighborhood also, because his father thought that mixing with other children will further kill his intellect. So he had no childhood friend. Only children that he knew was his own brother and sister in his own home. Outside home, he never knew that other children also exist in the world. That was the type of controlled environment in which he was brought up. But he was a person of very high intellect. It is said that at around 20-21 years of age, he fell in love with the married woman Harriet Taylor, a neighbor. And then after, well, for the next 21 years, he maintained a very platonic relationship with that lady. Very platonic relationship, very pure relationship. Every day he used to go to that lady, talk to her, debate and discuss with her. And every book that he had about the intellectual matters only. And in every book he has written on the dedication page that this book I dedicate to Harriet Taylor. And he has written in the preface in all his books that all the ideas contained in this book came to my mind only when I was talking to that lady. That lady's influence was so strong that only while talking to her, he thought that all these ideas has come to us, come to my mind. So that was very enriching intellectual influence that this lady had over him. 21 years he had this relationship like this. After 21 years, when this Harriet Taylor, this lady, her husband died. He did not kill him. When her husband died, then he married her. And then after 8 years later, this lady also died. So he waited for 21 years for marriage and only 8 years of married life he had. And then after he did not marry rest of the life. So you can say that he was a person of very high intellect and very strong personal commitment. Throughout his life, before marriage, during marriage, and after death of that lady, he always remained committed to that lady. It is because of that lady, you can see that influence of that lady, that well, he became one of the most important feminists of the world at his age. He was a strong supporter of the rights of the women. He always thought that women must have equal rights to men. That was the time when women had no political and other public rights and all. So, but he was a supporter of that. He was one of the most important feminists of the world of that age. And it was also because of that lady and her influence over him. So that was the personality of John Stuart Mill. So he tried to improve the utilitarianism and make it more acceptable to the modern sensibilities, modern moral thought. So let us see how did he influence the utilitarian philosophy and its further development. John Stuart Mill was perhaps the most important philosopher in the world in the 19th century, at least as far as moral philosophy is concerned. He, along with Immanuel Kant we will discuss in day after tomorrow's class. He, along with Immanuel Kant, is often considered as the father of modernity. Today we often talk about that we are living in a modern world. So, if you look at it, then he is considered to be the prophet of modernity in a way, along with Immanuel Kant. We'll talk about in this class today and tomorrow, first class of tomorrow, why do we consider him as the prophet of modernity and how Kant became prophet of modernity later on. Day after tomorrow we will discuss that. So let us talk about him first of all. How did he influence the utilitarianism in particular and moral philosophy in general? Let me see. This type of culture only exists in Western country, not in India. As for Indians, people, emotional value is more than its monetary value or materialistic value. Is it, sir? Pinto? Not necessarily, Pinto. In India also there are many people, as I told you, that there may be some people around you also for whom money is all. So it's not about that. In India also we had, as I told you, in ancient India also we had Charvaks who talked about the materialistic value as the only value. So in India also there are large number of people who consider that materialistic value is the only value. So for them sentiments does not matter much. So this type of people can be found everywhere. Of course, you may be true to some extent that in the Western country there are more people are like that. But we cannot say that in India we don't have any such person. Money is important for Indians also, and there are some people in India also where everything is. They are willing to fight with their own parents also for the sake of money. They are willing to kill others also for the sake of money. All the family feud happens, property about etc. is what? Money is important than the relationship, sentiments. So brother and brother fight with each other, parents and children fight with each other on the money. Is that not monetary value in that case? So it is wrong to say that in India we do not have such people. Such people are everywhere, including in our country as well. So that is the thing. So let us see how John Stuart Mill helped us to understand the moral philosophy. Write down firstly. Mill brought about three changes. Mill brought about three changes in the classical theory of Mill brought about three changes in the classical theory of utilitarianism. First one. So in a way you can say he tried to bring about three improvement upon that. First, as we will see, is a simple clarification. Second, that we will talk about in tomorrow's class, is the most important contribution of John Stuart Mill in the moral philosophy. So that we will talk about in tomorrow, but today we will talk about the first one in some detail, that is a simple clarification. Simple clarification, systematization of Bentham's idea in a way. So first one, write down. Rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism. Now write down a few lines. Write down a few lines. According to Mill, right action must be decided. Right action must be decided in terms of the consequence. Right action must be decided in terms of the consequence, but it should be the long term consequence rather than the immediate one. But it should be the long term consequence rather than the immediate one. Now this is the first thing that we can talk about here. The idea here is that first of all he agrees with Bentham that right action must be decided with reference to the consequence. But now he makes a qualification saying that this consequence should be the long term consequence rather than the immediate one. Suppose for example, because what happens sometimes, suppose for example there are two choices are there in front of you. If you do A, then A may have bad consequence right now, but in the long term it can have good consequence. B on the other hand, it may have good consequence right now, but in the long term it may have bad consequence. Suppose for example, well, let's take this case. This is the case of speaking truth, and suppose this is the case of lying. That case, same case again, lying to the old lady. Remember that case? Now, in this case, if you lie to that old lady about the death of her son, then, well, or if you speak truth to her, if you lie to that old lady about the death of her son, then it will create more better consequence right now that this lady will have a more peaceful death, comparatively peaceful death. But in the long term, what will happen? Perhaps it will actually weaken the trust between the people. Every mother will start, or grandmother will start doubting her grandchildren, that my son or my grandson is lying to me in order to make me happier. So nobody will trust anybody. The moment you will say something good to me, then I will start doubting that are you lying to me to make me happier? So I will not trust you, and the trust in society will be lost, and if the trust is not there, then no relationship can exist. So it will create doubt in the mind of everyone that will have a serious consequence for the society in the long run. So immediately one lady may have a peaceful death maybe, but in the long term it will be a devastating thing. If you speak truth on the other hand, then it may create pain for that lady, but it will still retain the trust in the society. People will keep on trusting each other because people will know that even at the cost of making me unhappy sometimes, you will still speak the truth. So because of that, he will say we should speak truth to that old lady. Because long-term consequence of truth is better than the long-term consequence of lying. So he agrees with Bentham that consequence is the determining factor, but that consequence must be the long-term consequence rather than the immediate consequence. That is the one important thing that he talks about. Now, this idea that long-term consequence is more important than the immediate consequence is a good appealing idea. But one problem in this idea is that immediate consequence, you know what is going to happen just now. But how do you know the long-term consequence of your action? How do you know, for example, what is going to happen 5 years later, 10 years later? We don't see that far in the immediate future, we can imagine. But that far in the future, nobody knows. So how do you decide what is going to happen in that case? Mill gives you a solution for that. Write down further. In order to consider the long-term consequence, we should make certain rules of right behavior. We should make certain rules of right behavior on the following basis. We should make certain rules of right behavior on the basis of the following. First one, by universalizing the act. by universalizing the act. Now, this is the solution of Mill. He says that in order to take into consideration the long-term consequence, we should make certain rules of right behavior. How do you make a rule? Well, first important basis of rule making is the universalizing the act. So, whenever you are planning to do something, just what is meaning of term universalization? It means that whenever you are planning to do something, just imagine that if everybody in the world will start doing the same thing, then what will be the consequence of that thing for the society in the long term. For example, if just imagine if you speak truth or if you lie, for example, if you are planning to lie to that old lady, just imagine if everybody in the world starts lying to each other in order to make the other person happier, will that make a better world? If yes, then lying is a correct rule. Otherwise, it is a bad rule. Truth, on the other hand, also imagine that if everybody in the world speaks truth to everybody else, even sometimes at the cost of making other people unhappy, will that make a better world or not? If yes, then truth is a good rule and you must speak the truth. Universalization means that. So, it simply means that just imagine if everybody in the world starts doing the same thing, what will be the consequence for the society? Number one. Second important basis is that, write down further, on the basis of the past experience. On the basis of the past experience. So, second important thing that he says is that future we don't remember, future we don't know, but past we do remember. So, look at the past, forget about the future, look at the past. What was the impact of such people, well, who followed these rules on the society? So, what are the impact of such a person like Gandhi, for example, who always spoke the truth, even sometimes at the cost of making others unhappy? Did he make a better world? If yes, then truth is good. Otherwise, truth is bad. So, past experience. On the basis of these two things, by imagining everybody else doing the same thing and by recalling the past experience, make certain rules. So, on the basis of that, he will say make certain rules like, for example, always respect life of an individual or always speak the truth. Make certain rules like that. Then after, write down further. After that, we should always follow these rules. After that, we should always follow these rules regardless of their immediate consequence. Regardless of their immediate consequence, because this will always create greater benefits for the society. Because this will always create greater benefits for the society in the long run. It will always create greater benefits for the society in the long run. So, he says here that once you make certain rules, like for example these things, then after just follow that rule. Forget about the immediate consequence and take it for granted that if you always follow these rules, then it will always be beneficial for the society in the long term. Maybe not immediately, but in the long term, it will always be beneficial. So, that is how he says. Because of this, write down further. Because of this, Mill's theory is sometimes called Because of this, Mill's theory is sometimes called rule utilitarianism. Mill's theory is sometimes called rule utilitarianism, while Bentham's theory is sometimes known as act utilitarianism. While Bentham's theory is sometimes known as act utilitarianism. So, idea here is that because of this region, Mill's theory is now known as, so now we can say there are two branches of utilitarianism. One is called act utilitarianism, that is original branch of Bentham, which will say that each action must be evaluated for its consequence. And the second branch is called rule utilitarianism, Mill's branch, which say that we don't have to bother about act, forget about it, act, remember the rule, and just follow the rule and take it for granted that if you all follow the rules, then it will always be beneficial for the society in the long term. Now, in this case, you can see that if you think like this one, there was a question in earlier last class, which is, now we can take up that. So, by talking about this thing again, you can see there was a question in the previous class, Anirban says sometimes it is very hard to determine the consequences of an action during making a decision. If someone's honest decision leads to bad consequence, then as per utilitarianism, can we call the person unethical? Anirban, this is where your answer can possibly be. So, the idea is that by talking about the long-term consequence, rule, for example, Mill have made our life much simpler. Because if you believe in the Bentham's theory, and everyone has picked up the right point here, if you believe in the Bentham's theory, then you can imagine that Bentham's theory is a very difficult theory to implement, to follow. Because Bentham's theory will say that every time when you do something, you have to make a calculation. Should I help that person on the road or not? Make a calculation. Should I be on time in the classroom or not? Make a calculation. Should I lie to that lady or not? Make a calculation. Now, in many situations, you can say calculation may be difficult. We cannot make a calculation. We don't have that much of time also, that much of mental ability also. So, all the time it is impossible for us to make a calculation. So, there was a very demanding theory. But now Mill says, forget about the calculation now. Just remember the consequence, just remember the rule and just follow that. And take it for granted that if you all follow the rule, it will always be beneficial for the society in the long run. Not maybe immediately, but in the long term, it will be beneficial. Now, this idea that rule is important is a very good idea, important idea. But there is one problem still remains in that idea. Problem is that life would have been much simpler had there been a single rule. But the problem with the life is that there are more than one rules and sometimes they are in contradiction with each other. We cannot follow both of them. So, this is where the dilemma occurs. Suppose let's take a small example. Suppose for example, suppose one day you are standing on the gate of your house and one of your friend comes running to you and he tells you that please hide me inside your house. There is a murderer behind me. He is trying to kill me. He is trying to kill me. Now, in this case, what is the right thing to do? Well, you respect the life of the person, you hide your friend. Now, suppose 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, that murderer comes to you and he asks you that, have you seen Mr. X? Now, you must speak the truth. Second rule. Now, this is where the problem comes up. If you speak the truth, then your friend will be killed. And if you try to save the life of your friend, then you have to lie. You cannot speak the truth. Both of these two rules cannot be followed simultaneously now. This is where the dilemma occurs. Had there been a single rule, life would have been very simple. But the problem with the life is that there are more than one rules are there and they may contradict each other. They may be in conflict with each other. In such a situation, what to do? Mill gives a solution for that also. Change the paragraph and then after write further. But sometimes more than one rules may conflict with each other, but sometimes more than one rules may conflict with each other. In such cases, Mill suggests us to go back to act utilitarianism. Mill suggests us to go back to act utilitarianism and decide the right action on the basis of the immediate consequence. Decide the right action on the basis of the immediate consequence. But this should be done only as an exception. So, in this case, Mill will say that when there is a conflict between these two rules, then have to forget about the rule. Go back to the original idea of Bentham that each act must be evaluated for its consequence. So, in this case, suppose for example, you have to decide whether to speak truth or not to that murderer. Now, in this case, just calculate the cost of truthfulness and benefit of truthfulness. Now, if you speak the truth, then cost is much higher that your friend will die, and benefits are much lower that virtually no benefit. Only that murderer will be happier by executing his plan to murder somebody. So, benefit is much lower and cost is much higher. So, in this case, you can decide not to speak the truth. You can lie to that murderer. There is nothing wrong in lying in that case. But that does not mean that truth has become less important. Truth is as important as it earlier was. So, the idea here, the main important thing that you have to take away from this topic is that it can be, rule can have an exception. So, rule can have an exception, that is an important thing that you need to remember. In this situation, it is okay for us to make an exception to the rule. But after that, truth is as important as it was earlier. It has not become a bad rule. It is as good as it earlier was. In this special case, we simply made an exception to that. So, this is the important thing that you need to remember, that rule can have an exception. Principles are exceptionless. Principles we will talk about day after tomorrow class or maybe next day. So, principles are exceptionless, but rules can have an exception. So, in the case of principle, if you look at it, people die for the sake of principles. Nobody dies for the sake of rule. Rule can have an exception. You can break a rule sometimes, you can override a rule sometimes, you can bend the rule sometimes. But principles can never be overridden, should never be broken, should never be made an exception of. They are exceptionless. So, this is what Mill will say, and this is one thing that you need to remember in your case studies also, that as a civil servant you may have to follow many rules, but sometimes you need to remember that rules can have an exception. It is okay for us as a civil servant sometimes to make an exception to the rule and do something that may be desirable. This is what Mill will say about the rule utilitarianism. So, that is the first important contribution of John Stuart Mill. This is how he tried to systematize the Bentham's theory, make it more systematic, more cogent, more constructive, you can say the regular in that case. So, that is the first important contribution of Mill. A second important contribution of John Stuart Mill is the greatest contribution of Mill in the moral philosophy overall, and that would be the idea of liberty. So, second important contribution, liberty, is the greatest contribution of John Stuart Mill in the moral philosophy. He is actually known in the field of moral philosophy for the sake of his support for liberty. So, Next important thing that we will talk about liberty of John Stuart Mill in much detail, but that we will talk about in tomorrow's class. So tomorrow we will talk about the John Stuart Mill and his liberty. The major part of that, it is for this reason that he is often considered as the greatest philosopher of the 19th century, perhaps one of the fathers of modernity. Why so? We will discuss that in tomorrow's class. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we will talk about the liberty of John Stuart Mill. Sir, could you please provide your contact number or email? Well, you can ask from the office itself, we'll get it.